All right, are we live? We good?
It says live.
Okay, here we go. So, hey everyone out there, I'm here with Tucker Max. Tucker, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, man.
Hey, it's the pleasure's definitely mine. As I was telling you, it's your book. I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell was a New York Times bestseller, and that is where I got introduced to Tucker Max. That's it's sitting right over there. Damn, I should have that with me right now. But it's just something that a bunch of buddies of mine can relate to, those hilarious stories. If you want to kind of just tell a little bit about that book and what inspired you to put pen to paper and get that going, that'd be first off. Yeah, where are you from? Where'd you go to school? How'd you get started with that? I want to hear it all.
So the book started basically. You got to remember it was. I think it was 01, 02 when I started sort of doing that. And that was before MySpace or Facebook or sort of anything. I think that was a word before the word blog even existed. Like back then the internet was like 30 million people. Like it was like the only people who were on the internet were creepy weirdos for the most part. Or at least that was the idea. And so I was in a job I hated after law school. And so I would write emails to my friends. I was mid-20s and I'd go out and get drunk and act stupid and do all the same stuff we all do in our 20s. And my friends, like there was 8 of us and we all kind of wrote emails to each other about, like, I guess what people would do in group chat now, we did over email, right?
Yeah.
And so like I really hated my job. And so I would do the dumbest things and I would spend the most time writing emails about it because I didn't like what I was doing. And it turned out my emails were funny, and my friends started forwarding those around to other people. And then I got fired from my job. I was actually working for my dad in the family business, and I got fired from the family business by my father. And so my friends were like, "Yeah, you're not real good at business or law, but these emails you're writing are like the funniest thing we've ever read. You should do that." And I was like, "What are you talking about? Only bitches and faggots are writers." Like that was my mindset at the time, obviously. Which is funny because that's literally what I am now, a writer. And so, long story short, I ended up they eventually convinced me to do this. And the reason was because they forwarded my stuff around and I ended up getting my emails forwarded back to me by like people I went to high school with or college with. They were all my law school friends. And so I was like, man, if people are forwarding stuff to me that I know in other social circles, that must mean this is good, because why the hell else would anyone sort of spread this, right? This is back when email forwards existed. Like probably like your 20-year-old listeners are like, what the hell is he talking about? Who forwards emails? Yeah, so this is again before like current forms of media.
Right.
So I tried to get it published and I got rejected 100%. Every publisher, every agent, not one person was interested. In fact, a lot of people were like, this is the worst stuff we've ever read. You need to go find something else to do. You're never going to be a writer. And I was like, you people are idiots. You've never written anything. I know my stuff is good, not because of anything I think, but because people are forwarding it around to other people. That's the definition of good, right? Yeah. Other people want it. And so I put all my stuff up on a website for free. This is like back when GeoCities still existed. If you remember I think I put it on GeoCities. And it took a few months, but it kind of blew up. Like College Humor picked it up back when they were first starting.
I remember that.
And, there's a couple sites, Board at Work. There were a few others that that kind of picked it up, and then it kind of blew up. And then MTV came to film me because that was back when it was like a weird thing to be on the internet. And then there was a few other things, and then this girl sued me, and that's actually in my second book. This girl I dated sued me. And that became like a huge thing, and then it just went from there, man. But it was all because honestly, what I did was I wrote stories about the same things that we all do. We all get drunk, we all act stupid, we all fall down, we hook up with girls or guys, whatever. And I was really the first one who wrote about it in a really honest, authentic way, under my own name, on the internet for free, in a way that was really funny and engaging. So.
And a lot of that, and so what I'm finding out, a lot about relatability and some, things that so many people can relate to, everything that you just mentioned, as far as like going out, having a great time, making some unfortunate decisions that, then putting them down on paper is hilarious. And I just know you make a very good point with group chat these days. And some things should be a little bit more contained with some things that just I know friends and I have just as far as just sharing stories that are hilarious. I've always thought about that, just printing out some of our discussions and just back and forth, our banter, seriously, and just putting it in a little coffee table book. Urban Outfitters has stuff like that.
It would suck though. Do you know why? Not because you guys aren't funny. So many people have tried this. Everyone thinks their friends are funny, right? And even if they are, because I've definitely met people who are like really funny and their friends are funny, it requires too much context. You've got to really know the people, right? What made my stuff good was you didn't have to know me or my friends at all. Like, I know people who have read all of everything I've ever written, and they still don't actually know anything about me. They know the stories, but they'll meet me and they're like, oh, you're like totally different than I expected. I'm like, right, because what you read was stuff that all true, all funny, whatever, but it's not about me. It is about entertainment. You know what I'm saying? And so most people can't make that distinction, that switch. Like being funny among friends and being funny objectively to strangers are almost totally different things.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, how many people do you know are super funny, but like if they got up on stage and tried to tell a joke, they would bomb? I've met a lot of comedians who actually aren't that funny in person.
Yeah.
Again, being funny on stage and being funny with people, and you can do both, but they're not the exact same thing.
No, I hear you. And even there's some comedians that there are a couple of people that come to mind right now, which I'll just keep to myself, but that just aren't that funny on stage, period. So,
it might be funny to you, but someone thinks they're funny.
Obviously,
people are paying to watch them.
That's a good point.
They're on stage.
Yep, that's a good point. And their names too, and they're traveling. They have specials, so good for them. I should probably keep my mouth shut. But yeah, no, I hear you. So, can you tell us the process of what happened when you started to see that trickle of momentum towards Hollywood? People out there that don't know, I mean, they made a movie after your story, which, I mean, that had to be insane. I mean, so walk me through, if you can, the timeline of having those meetings with, I don't know, maybe a literary agent I'm sure you met with, I don't know, who ended up doing
it was years. Okay. So, man, how do we go down that rabbit hole? So Hollywood was the worst. The worst. I almost would have rather gone to prison than Hollywood, because at least in prison, when they come to rape you, you know who the enemy is, and you can fight. Hollywood is dude, it's the worst, man. I can't even describe. I spent years out there, and I'm one of the success stories. I got my movie made. I still own the underlying rights. I mean, it didn't blow up the box office at all, but it ended up making money, on DVD and whatever. It's a terrible, terrible system. I mean, we talked to everybody. Here's what I hated about Hollywood. Aside from the fact that, for the most part, everyone with power in Hollywood is a sociopath. Not literally everyone, but pretty much everyone. Oh, dude, it's the worst. It's because the system is designed that way. It's kind of like the more evil you are, the better you do, not as a creator, but as an executive. Right? That's where all the real power in Hollywood is. It's not with the names you know, it's with the names you don't know. And those people are pretty much all terrible people. And so I didn't want to do business with any of them. So I ended up going independent, and I ended up raising the money myself from a production company and all this sort of stuff. And I owned the underlying rights, and I kept creative control. And, I did all this sort of stuff that is kind of impossible to do in Hollywood. I did. Now, it ended up screwing me in the movie because we couldn't get widespread distribution. Even though we got it in theaters, it wasn't a major release because we weren't with a major studio, because I wouldn't give up the rights. And,
wow.
And yeah, dude, it's a really long, complicated story that's probably super boring to most of your audience.
Okay, yeah. I was going to ask who produced it. Lionsgate.
So the people who produced it was the guys behind Donnie Darko, were the producers and the financiers. They were kind of the main driving force.
But props to you on raising it. I think it was $7 million, right?
For the production, yeah. And then it was, I don't know what we spent, maybe 4 or 5 on release, which is it's just not enough. We tried, our strategy was screwed up, and then the worst thing is, picked the wrong director, which is my fault. Like, I'm not even blaming this on anyone else. Writing a book is a very solitary thing. Like, I sit alone at my computer, I write, and either it's good or it's not. I own it. It's on me, right? A movie is this weird collaborative art where there's dozens of people who greatly impact it. And in my dumbass, naive mind, I thought, like, I had a writing partner on the script, and we wrote an amazing script. Like, we got offered $2.5 million from Fox Searchlight for the script, which we turned them down so that we could retain the rights and creative control. And in my dumbass mind, I thought because the script was amazing, it would mean the movie would be amazing. It didn't matter what director we picked. That is wrong. That's totally wrong.
Yeah.
He picked just the wrong director, man, and he screwed up the entire movie. And it wasn't even like he's a bad person. He was just a bad director, and he was the wrong fit for this movie. And I didn't even realize it. So it was like things were screwed before I even knew it. Before we could even get to the point where it was released or anything. And there's so many factors to Hollywood, dude. It's awful. It's the worst.
I hear you, and I don't know if I told you this. I act, and I do. That's what got me into earning money to start my brand after the accident. But I mean, I'm involved with it on a different angle. But I do have friends that are on the that I grew up with that are on the management side, and I hear stories. That's why I'm right where I'm supposed to be with Alitura. I own a skincare line now, and I didn't love the entertainment industry. It was just something I did. It kind of fell into my lap, literally. But I hear what you're saying, and I'm right where I'm supposed to be. I'll just keep it at that. But I'm curious right now. First off, like going from not just writing, but from writing your book to writing a script and just back and forth dialogue. That's impressive. We all have ideas, but to have something that works and to get an offer like that's impressive. Especially when
I mean, that was like, if you read you read my book, so my books are very script-like. Like the dialogue is very scriptish. So that was actually pretty easy for me. The hard part for me was translating the vision in my head and the dialogue to the screen. I just didn't. If I were to do it all again, either I would pick a great director and just give them the screenplay and then go away and say, do your best, and God willing, or I would go the other way around and I would learn to be a director and just direct it myself. Like I would do one or the other. Because what I did just didn't work. I kind of picked a dude I thought would just be our shot maker and translate my vision on the screen. It just didn't work. And I'm not sure it's workable.
Was it, because going into it, it had to be frustrating, but were you there every day?
I was there every day.
Man, were you just couldn't?
It was the worst. It was the worst experience of my life. It was the worst experience of my life. And I don't want to blame everything bad that happened on the movie on everyone else. Like I was really responsible for probably almost all the bad stuff because the director was terrible. I picked him, so it's my fault, right?
Yeah.
And I was still very, I think, very emotionally immature. And so I was just angry on the movie set all the time. I was pissed off at things that were screwing up. I was I made it all about me, and as bad as the director was, he didn't even have a shot, man. The way I acted on the set, I just screwed everything up, man. It just didn't work. It's my fault.
Yeah. Well, that's accountability 101 right there. Respect for that. But, you did it, though. It's badass. I mean, obviously, taking an idea and bringing it, to fruition is just...
It is funny. It's a total first world white person problem to be like, I had a movie made about my life before I was 35, and it didn't do... 50 million at the box office, so I feel terrible about myself. It is kind of funny to complain about it from that angle. When you look at it, what the hell's wrong with you? How are you?
Theaters. It's just, dude. That's to me. I'm like, man, that's a dream come true, and it did. I mean, it didn't do horrible. I know. I've looked at the numbers.
I mean, it's sort of a dream come true. But what's really frustrating about it is that it could have been great, and it wasn't. It wasn't great, and honestly, when I really step back and look at it, the main reason it wasn't great is because of my issues and what I did wrong. Even Hollywood is terrible and the director was wrong. None of those are the actual reason the movie didn't work. That's really on me. And so that's the frustrating thing, man, is to work so hard to write these great stories, to entertain so many people, and then have the opportunity to turn it into a movie and then screw it up because of your own stuff you didn't realize. It's frustrating, dude. I mean, it is, you know?
I hear you. I can imagine. I'm doing my best to put myself in your shoes right there. And hey, just curious, did that develop into a flicker of a passion is that something down the road? I'm sure you have a lot of material. Even if it's not even your story, did you every day on set, was it something that you fell in love with, or did any passion, or no?
No. Movies are look, you can always tell your passion by what do you do when nobody's watching, there's no money involved, whatever. Like, I love reading, learning, writing. Like, I've been doing that my whole life. I've never been a huge movie person. I can't remember the last. I've been married 40 years, and my wife and I have been to one movie together. Like, she's not a movie person either. And so it's no, it didn't. And so it's I don't mind video, and I don't mind that sort of transmission medium. It's just not, I would be a liar to say it's my passion or it created anything. That might have been part of the problem, man, honestly.
Okay. Yeah. So let's, segue into what you are passionate about. And to the audience out there, Tucker has a killer, just from start to finish company where you can bring your idea as an author which I may do. I've been back and forth. Oh, shoot, I forget his name. At a call with
Kevin.
And, I definitely want to document my story from start to finish. And your company, Book in the Box, is a way for people to do that. I believe Khalil Rafati used.
Khalil did, yeah. He wrote a book. He wrote the book called "I Forgot to Die." It's done really well. Yeah.
It's done very well, and just a story of resilience, coming back, bouncing back in such a very, dealing with addiction and things like that. But that's his story. But you, from start to finish, how did you get involved with Book in a Box?
So it's like the total opposite of my first phase of my career. I was at an entrepreneur dinner, and this woman came up to me, and she, knew, she didn't really know who I was, but she knew I'd written books and I had experience in publishing. And she's like, hey, people have been asking me to write a book for 10 years about what I know. She's like, I tried, I didn't like it. I don't want to sit at a computer for a year. How do I get this book out of my head without having to do that? And so I kind of looked at her and I was like, are you asking me how to write a book without writing it? And she's like, yeah, I kind of am. And I'm like, so I'm like, what are you talking about? There's no way to do that. And I start kind of making fun of her and lecturing her about hard work and all this nonsense, and which is ridiculous because this woman's done way more in her life than I have. And so she kind of rolls her eyes at me and she stops me. She says, Tucker, are you an entrepreneur? And I'm like, well, yeah, of course. She's like, I don't know. I'm not sure about that because an entrepreneur would help me solve my problem and not just lecture me about hard work. I was like, fuck you. But she was right. She was 100% right. And so I became obsessed with this idea. How does she get a book out of her head without having to sit at a computer for a year and type it out? Mm-hmm. And then eventually, it took 2 months, but eventually it hit me. Oh, of course. There's lots of people who've done this. Jesus never wrote anything down, and we have the Bible. Socrates never wrote anything down, and we have all of his work. Buddha never wrote anything down. Malcolm X, go on the list of all these great Western thinkers, all these classics in Western history. How did they get written? Scribes. So it's like, oh, of course. Well, if Jesus can do it, why can't Melissa? And so I wrote on a whiteboard like this, I wrote down every step of writing a book, and with really granular detail. And I realized I didn't need her for anything except the content. She's utterly crucial for that. Because that was a big thing. She's like, look, I want this book to be my voice, my words. She's like, I don't want ghostwriting. I want it to be a real book that's fully me, but I just can't sit there and type it out. And so I basically just would call her up. I would go through every step, and when I needed her, I would call her, and then I figured out a way to interview her to get everything out of her, all of her ideas out of her head and her words and her voice. Mm-hmm. And then I would record it, I would transcribe it, I'd get it transcribed, and then I would kind of edit it. And we did this back and forth for a while, and I wasn't sure if it was going to work. It ended up working great. And so her book has gone on and done fantastic. I mean, it's tripled her business, and she's done millions of dollars. She's like a consultant in retail, done millions of dollars of business off of this book. And I'm so dumb, dude. I did this work with her, and I kind of did it because it was fun, and I was like, interesting. Let me see if I can do it. It didn't even occur to me that this was a business until she referred some of her friends to me, and they were like, hey, can you do this for me too? And I was like, yeah, sure. And they're like, okay, Melissa paid whatever, 10 grand or whatever it was. Here's a check. And I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, here's money. Let's go start. And then I talked about this on a podcast, on Lewis Howes' podcast, 3 years ago. He interviewed me about something totally different. And I talked about this, and we got $200,000 of business, people just flooding my email. And the guy I was working with at the time, Zach, was like, dude, I think this is a business. And I'm like, yeah, obviously it is. If people are hurling money at you to solve a problem for them, that's a business.
Right.
And so we just kind of kept going and going and going. And we literally, is today August 1st? No, July 31st.
July 31st.
Business, our official start date was August 1st, 2014. So it was almost 3 years to the day of this interview. We've done, I don't know how much now, 550 books. We've got 26, 27 full-time people now, 150 freelancers. It's like a big business now.
And you just broke 10 million revenue.
10 million in revenue, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Respect. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, I would say we're growing. It's kind of weird. It seems crazy. It seems like just yesterday, I was doing that work with Melissa, but then also it feels like 10 years ago too. It's there's been a lot of stuff going on in the last 3 years.
I mean, in a smaller level, I can relate to that exact statement. It does seem like yesterday in my business, but at the same time, every day, it's just when you're on, there's no off button. It's 24/7. It's all I think about, really, is in my business. It's a little obsessive, but I love, it's like you said, it's the things you would do regardless. When I walk around my house, I don't stop, whether it's nutrition, health, wellness, skincare. It's all I do. So that's why I found, my purpose and right where I'm supposed to be. So I can relate to that. It's awesome, man. So, and I definitely am considering using Book in the Box for my story. I just, from top to bottom, I've something I think people can relate to. And that's, in your opinion, the stories that do the best, would you say that's the biggest, the biggest thing that makes a book successful or a story successful is being able to relate to someone, or is it skills? Is it definitive points?
It depends. I think it all boils down to if you said there's one thing that all successful books have, it's that the person buying the book thinks they're going to get something from it, right? Mm-hmm. Something that they want. So that actually applies to fiction or nonfiction. Every woman who buys a romance novel, right, or dude who buys a fantasy novel or whatever, they want to get entertainment. They want to understand themselves better. Whatever things they read fiction for, right? Prescriptive nonfiction is very much I want to learn a skill, right? Memoir is very much it's the type of thing where people are like, I want to learn more about myself, or I want to be inspired, or there's an emotion I want to feel, right? And so Khalil's book is a really good example. Khalil's experience in life is very similar to a lot of people, and he's a little bit further on the journey than they are. And so I feel like that's probably why his book has done really well, is because it gives people something. It's not that no one cares about Khalil, it's that they're buying his book because they care about what his book will do for them, right? And a lot of authors or people who want to write books don't actually think about that ahead of time. They'll be like, oh, I want to write a book. And a lot of them will be like, oh, well, they just want to tell their story. And that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. If you just want to tell your story, then you don't need to publish it, man. It's called the diary. And write up your story and keep it in a diary, and that can help. Writing as therapy is extraordinarily valuable for a lot of people. If you want to publish it, the question you have to ask is not why does anyone else care, right? A lot of people want to publish, and ultimately, to be honest, the reason they want to publish is because they want attention. And it's there's nothing wrong with wanting attention. That's totally fine. But if that's the only reason you're publishing, then you're never going to ask yourself the question, it's not going to be popular because you're never going to ask yourself the question, why is anyone else going to care, right?
Right.
So if you're telling and I don't mean you specifically, just anybody. If you want to tell your story, the question, and you want to publish it, the question you need to answer for yourself, ask yourself is, why is anyone else going to care? So if you think you have a story that is a lot of people share, that a lot of people can take stuff from, that they can improve their lives off of, great. Then that's a great reason to do a book. And so the next step then is to make sure you structure it properly, et cetera, and then be really vulnerable, right? Because a lot of people, and we don't work with these people because it's a pain in the ass, but most of the memoirs I see, to be honest, are just self-aggrandizing bullshit. It's just people I want everyone to recognize how cool I am and how valid I am, and I want my parents to think I'm important and shit like that. And it's like, you don't need to write a book to do that, like there's other ways.
Right.
But a book should always be about the audience, because like paradoxically, if you make it about the audience, then you will, the book will be way more successful, because people will want to read it, because that's why everyone buys books, is to get something out of it. So you need to understand very clearly, what is someone going to take from this? And then how do I make sure that they provide that? Does that make sense?
It does. And so just from a personal development aspect, and I'm just kind of like, after that phone call, I just was going over what I want to do, just personal development, inspiration, things like that, or I won't do it. These are just things that I was thinking about, and I still think about as far as, but that's really good as far as like what I would do, what direction I would head personally if I were to write a book.
Well, the question for you is, who's my audience, right? Who do I expect to read this, and why are they going to care? Like those are the two really specific questions you need to answer. Like with Khalil, the answer was his audience are current addicts and people trying to recover and people struggling with recovery, right? Why are they going to care? Because they're going to see themselves in him, and they're going to see not only what he did, but how he did it. Right. And he can become an inspiration for them, and also a roadmap for them, and all that sort of stuff, right? So like if you have similar answers in a different space, that's potentially a great reason to write the book, but we see this a lot, man. We turn down probably 20% of the people who come to us, and it's not even necessarily because they don't have a good book in them. It's because the book they want to write is not going to get them the ROI they want. Like we'll get people who come to us all the time. It's like, oh yeah, I want to write a book and I want to be Malcolm Gladwell and sell 1 million copies. And it's like, yeah, you don't want to work with us, because that's just not going to happen. It's utterly unrealistic. And like your content's not going to do that, like Khalil, his book is really, really done really well. It's sold like 50,000 copies, which is a huge number for nonfiction. Like that's a big number, but like that, and he's been profiled in the New York Times. Like his book was profiled in the Times. Like he's gotten all this thing. Selling 1 million books is like utterly unrealistic. And so what that tells us is that those people don't care about their message. They care about attention, right? They care about the attention they get. And it's like, we don't work with them because we can do an amazing job. They're not going to care. Or they're not going to be happy with the book, because the book didn't get them this fantastical, unrealistic notion they had in their head. And then they're going to be upset, right? Like we work with people who understand, okay, I'm going to do a book. It has this specific goal. I want to reach these 10,000, 20,000, 50, 100,000, maybe 2, 3, 400,000, 500,000 people. And that's over 5 or 10 years,
Yeah.
Those are the people that we work with. Those are the people who do good books. Those are the people whose books really impact their life and the lives of others.
No, that completely makes sense. That completely makes sense. I remember sitting down with Khalil and just going over, how he got into this and how that book really, really did. I mean, not only did very well numbers wise, but really got him out there. I mean, he owns I think a Sun Life Organics. It was just,
it's like 3 or 4 juice bars, organic. But the important thing with Khalil's book, is if you read it, man, that dude held nothing back. That dude was, the picture on the cover is like a mugshot.
Yeah, I think it is.
He was like, it is. And he was just raw and authentic and which as an addict, you've got to be, right? That's the only way to face the truth. And so that's why that book is so good. There are other people out there who have stories just as crazy and amazing as him. And you don't have to have an extreme story for it to be good. what matters is that do you tell it with your whole self, especially if it's sort of like a memoir, personal development type thing.
Right. And some people, for many reasons hold back on that because they don't want to.
It's hard. It's fucking hard, man. It's really hard to open your soul to the world and be vulnerable. It's really hard.
Scar Tissue, Anthony Kiedis, one of my favorites. Woo, he didn't
great book.
At all.
Great book. Yeah, that's a great book.
Yeah. So I know you have somewhere to be, and I just have a couple questions here. If you could tell your younger self anything, any advice, it's just what would you say?
Yeah, the problem is my younger self was a dumbass who wouldn't listen. So,
yeah.
All right. So if a younger version of myself that would listen, the thing I would say, it ties back to kind of why the movie failed and almost every mistake I made in my young life. I needed to be way, way more humble. I needed to stop thinking I knew everything and listen to people, who have experience and really assess sort of. It doesn't mean just take everyone's word for it, but I needed to listen to people besides myself. I needed to realize that I wasn't a genius who knew everything. Which, like, if you'd asked me at 28, if I thought that, I would have said no, but really I did. And it led to a lot of poor decisions on my part that culminated with everything around the movie. So. Yeah,
that makes it, and I can definitely relate to that, man. I don't even know if I'd like to meet myself when I was 22 and 23 and just, it's kind of like.
I would kick my own ass without a doubt.
Just exactly. Just a cocky laugh. I'd look back just to certain things I did when I was, life humbles you, and it definitely humbled me. And I'm a sponge now, and I'm better from the mistakes that I've made for sure. I'm sure you can relate to something similar, but I really appreciate your time. This has been fun for me, and who knows, maybe we'll work together. It's something I definitely want to do. I just want to make sure I can dedicate every single ounce of my time and energy towards that, because I want to make it excellent, and I do. Good thing is I'm doing it for just helping others.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, that's the only thing is.
Here's the thing with that. The question I always like to ask people who are thinking about doing a book, the question is why now, right? And if you don't really have an answer for why now, then now probably isn't the right time, Okay. And we're going to be around for a long time, dude. Like a book is not something you should rush into because it's like if you do a bad book, it's not like it hurts you, but it's like you look, you're a young dude. You can probably write 10 books in your life. You can start multiple companies. There's a lot of things you can do. So I don't want to make it seem like, oh, you got one shot, you got to get it right. That's not true. But you don't have unlimited shots, and you don't want to kind of dive into things before you're ready. Which on the other side, there's some people who've been ready a long time and they wait too long, right? So here's the thing. You'll know it's right when you kind of feel like the message you have in you can't stay in you any longer. It's got to get out. Mm-hmm. That's kind of when you know it's right. If you're debating whether it's right, then go through, have Kevin send you our North Star doc, which is the first step of the process, and answer the questions just yourself. Just look through them and answer them. If you have really clear answers to those, and you're like, this is my exact audience. This is exactly what I'm going to say to them. This is exactly why they're going to benefit. This is exactly how their life is going to change. Then you're probably ready. If it's ambiguous or you're not sure, we'll be around in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, and by then think about how much smarter you're going to be in 3 years and how much wiser than you were you are now. Like, think about now versus 3 years ago with you. Think about now versus 3 years from now. If you wait 3 years, how much better will the book be? If you don't think it'll be any better, maybe now's a good time. If you think it's going to be a lot better, I'm going to know a lot more, probably wait,
Yeah, there are two sides to that. You are right with, just with envisioning where I see the company going, but on a personal aspect, the content is still pretty fresh from the accident. So I'd like to get that on paper, and maybe I can. And then when it's right to kind of add more to that ending chapter of my story, then maybe we'll go forward. But basically right now I should probably start putting things down because it's still fresh. The accident's still fresh.
So then scope the book down. If you want this book to be about the big mistake I see a lot of authors make is they feel like unconsciously, oh, I've got to get everything I know into one book, and then so they try and it's sort of like they try and fit everything together. It doesn't fit. Sort of like a meatball sundae, right? Like meatballs are delicious, ice cream is delicious. They're not good together, right? But most authors, what we do is they'll start here, and then we get them here, and this is not a great book from them, but this is a great book. And so when they get scoped down, they do a great book. And so that might be the case for you, man, is that in your head, you're like, oh, I need to write this amazing book about personal development, but maybe you don't have that in you. But you maybe do have an amazing book about how to recover from, I'm just spitballing, how to recover from an acute injury and turn your life around, right? Which is which would be, in the most amazing book ever about personal development, it would be a chapter. But if that's all you have, you can take that chapter and make it a full book. And then now when someone goes to, I bet there aren't a lot of books about that specific thing. How do I go from a disaster to a full recovery in a new direction? Just that thing alone. And that way you don't have to worry about writing the final chapter, because the final chapter is not written, dude. But the final chapter on that is written, right? The final chapter in your life is not, but the final chapter on that chapter is written. So that's another way to think about it is what's the specific thing I could teach somebody today in totality that would change their life? And it won't be ever, there's nothing you can teach everybody, right? But what's the thing I could teach? I could teach X. Okay, who are the people that have problem X? Oh, it's this group of people. Let me write a book for them. Make sense?
No, absolutely. And very specific with steps, and yeah, you're right. That's a good point. Very good point. This is all good stuff. We're jotting this down right now. I appreciate your time. This is a lot of fun for me just because of what I said. Big fan, and a lot of the stuff just from an entrepreneurial aspect, from just getting in and starting your new starting something else, starting a business, whatever it may be. I'm sure my audience got a lot out of this. I'm looking at the quotes and questions right now and comments, and I'll go through and answer that. You can go through and answer that if you want, but I really appreciate your time, Tucker.
Cool, man.
If you're ever out in LA, give me a shout. If not, man, where are you located? You're in Austin, right?
Austin, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right on. Well, thanks again for your time. Best of luck, and who knows, maybe we'll be working together down the road.
Awesome, man. Great talking to you.
Yeah, see you.